Secondly, we must contain this aggression. We are reinforcing NATO's eastern flank and supporting European security through the UK-led Joint Expeditionary Force. We are here in the Baltic region. We lead and have doubled our enhanced forward presence in Estonia. Our allies are leading troops across the Baltics. British military intelligence are working with Lithuania's military to enhance border defensive, including in the Sulvaki Gap. 200 troops are doing joint military exercises right now, and we're working together on maritime security. At the NATO Foreign Ministers meeting tomorrow, we will be working together to strengthen our collective defence in the light of the changed security situation across Europe. In terms of supporting Ukraine with defensive weaponry, the United Kingdom was the first European country to give defensive military support to Ukraine, and we are now also supporting with the humanitarian aid. We've pledged 220 million in aid support to Ukraine, and we're the top European donor, and we will do more. We've also been at the forefront in tightening the vice on the Kremlin through sanctions, and it's vital at this juncture that we keep our foot on the gas. We've worked with the US, the EU and G7 to cut off funding for Putin's war machine, kicking Russian banks out of the financial system. We've also shut our airspace to Russian planes, and we're fast-forwarding sanctions against Russian oligarchs. But we need to go further. We need to make sure no Russian bank has access to SWIFT, and we need to go further on reducing dependency on hydrocarbons from Russia, including oil, gas and coal. We've also launched sanctions against Belarus for aiding and abetting aggression. I will be raising these issues at the G7 tomorrow and also at the European Union Foreign Affairs Council alongside the United States, Canada and Ukraine, who have also been invited in these extraordinary circumstances. This is a struggle not just for Ukraine's freedom and self-determination, but for all of our freedom and security. By continuing to respond with strength, we will together ensure that Putin loses. And we stand with our brave allies here in the Baltics to do just that. Thank you.
Estijos užsienio reikalų ministrė Eva Marija Limets, prašau.
Thank you. And first of all, I would like to thank Gabrielius for bringing us together for this very much needed discussion and coordination among our Baltic friends and together with our very close ally, United Kingdom. We focused mainly on discussing war started by Russia in Europe and how we could support Ukraine more than we have done so far. I think we have done a lot, but I agree that we have to do more. We have to continue to support Ukraine politically, financially, and also to help with them to defend their country, their sovereignty and territorial integrity, but most importantly today also the lives of the people of Ukraine. Ukraine is a European country, and what we see at the moment, Ukraine is a country who is protecting European values in front line of Europe. From Estonian side, we continue to support Ukrainians' transatlantic aspirations and also support Ukrainian candidacy to the EU. We have to continue to send supportive messages to Ukraine to support their people in these very difficult circumstances. At the same time, of course, we must do our utmost to stop the war, and to stop the war we of course need to raise the cost of war. And here we have made good decisions, but we need to do more so that the cost of war for Russia would be expensive and that this war stops. I think that also it's very important to use all political means to take aggressor account, because these war crimes that we see taking place while we are speaking here, these people who are behind this, they must be taken accountable for their actions. Finally, I also would like to express Estonia's appreciation towards the United Kingdom, who is leading country of EFP mission in Estonia. We really are thankful for quick decisions that we have seen over the last few weeks by doubling UK troops in Estonia, and we very much look forward to tomorrow's decisions at the NATO level, how we could have permanent decisions for our region, how we permanently strengthen the eastern flank of Europe because of NATO, because the security situation in Europe has changed and the power of balance has changed, so we have to make adjustments within NATO. So I look forward to our tomorrow's meeting at the EU and NATO, and of course hope that this war that has started by Russia will end soon. Thank you.
Latvijos užsienio reikalų ministras Edgaras Rinkevičius.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Gabrielas, for being excellent host, and thank you very much, Liz, for coming, and also having great discussion with us, and also showing the full solidarity and support to the Baltic states. It's actually very difficult to speak as the last speaker, because everything has been said by previous colleagues speaking, and I think that I can agree with everything. However, let me stress 3 points. Number one, and that's about our strategy, I think, how to deal with this very difficult situation. Number one, we must continue supporting Ukraine in any way we can. I think that we are in agreement here. Ukraine needs diplomatic support, Ukraine needs political support, Ukraine needs economic support, and Ukraine needs support through military means. I think that this is where we are absolutely clear, and we have had very good exchange among ourselves about the ways how we can further have this assistance. Second, we must stop Russia from further aggression. And that's where sanctions, diplomatic pressure come in place. Well, I'm very satisfied with the way how European Union, G7, NATO has been acting in the past 7 days. I think that I can only agree with my colleagues that we still have plenty of work to do. We still haven't closed some loopholes. We still need to ensure that there are further economic sanctions against Russia, but also the same set of sanctions must be applied against Belarus, because Belarus is complicit of the aggression that Russian Federation is committing, and also Belarus could be used by Russia to actually avoid some of the harshest effects of sanctions. So from that point of view, we must have sanctions that target both aggressors, Russia and Belarus. And the third is the regional security. I do believe that NATO has been very successful establishing deterrence mission in this region after events of 2014, after occupation of Crimea. But I think that we are in the next phase where we must exercise deterrence and defense. We are very grateful to those allies who have already sent more troops to the region, but we also know that we need to respond to the very quickly changing situation. I know that many people are asking how safe are the Baltic states or Poland or any of eastern flank nations. I think that the presence of the Foreign Secretary here, the discussions that we are having at NATO and we are going to have tomorrow, sends a very clear signal that there is an ironclad commitment by NATO to do its work. There is concrete discussion and plans and also actions already taken. And I think that we all understand that we will see this kind of challenging situation as long as there is the current leadership in Russia and even beyond. So we must be prepared for a very long-term engagement addressing all those 3 elements I was just talking. So thank you very much one more time. Thank you very much also to colleagues for a very efficient and very fruitful discussion we had this morning.
Žiniasklaidos atstovų prašome pateikti klausimus. Klausimai lietuvių ir anglų kalbomis. Prašyčiau prieiti prie mikrofonų, prisistatyti bei pasakyti, kam adresuojate klausimą.
Hello, my name is Augustas Stankevičius. I'm from Baltic News Service. My question is for all the ministers. In recent days, perception of Russia and its threat shifted dramatically in the Western world. However, some experts claim that it's not enough, and the only way to stop Putin is for NATO to interfere. Otherwise, Russia will go further, causing more harm. And what's your take on that? And can sanctions alone make Russia stop war and withdraw its troops? Thank you very much.
Aš atsakysiu lietuviškai. Man rodos, kad kolegos visi esantys čia šiandien aiškiai nubrėžėme gairias, kuriuose turime siekti rezultatų ir kryptis, kuriuose turime daugiausia dirbti. Tai tolimesnis rytų flango stiprinimas, ypatinga dėmesį skiriant Baltijos valstybėm, tolimesnė pagalba Ukrainai ir tikrai nepakeliamos sankcijos Rusijai. Tai yra šio laikotarpio, sakyčiau, netgi šių dienų, šių savaičių uždavinys.
Secretary Truss.
There are three clear elements of our strategy. First of all is supporting Ukraine in their self-defense, both economically and with defensive weaponry. And we have seen a huge step up in terms of the number of nations committing to that. We've recently seen Germany shift their policy, which is extremely welcome. And that support is being felt. And what we are seeing is Russia being surprised by the level and strength of resistance in Ukraine and very, very brave actions by the Ukrainian president and the Ukrainian people. The second thing we need to do is degrade the Russian economy to stop the ability to fund Putin's war machine. And of course, the banking measures are key to that, the measures of SWIFT, the measures we took against the central bank. But it's also important that we need to reduce dependence on hydrocarbons, which ultimately have given Putin the ability to fund this terrible destruction. And the final point is strengthening NATO's eastern flank in response to what is a new security situation in Europe. And that is why I'm here today in Vilnius to show the United Kingdom's commitment to strengthen the flank. We will have further discussions tomorrow at the NATO foreign ministers, but we are absolutely determined to ensure the peace and security of all of those countries right across NATO.
Minister Limits, please.
Thank you. From Estonian side, we have the same view that we must continue to support Ukraine politically, but also with defense means, and also make it clear for Russia that this unjustified war must end, and the cost for this war for Russia is a big one. With regard to defense support for Ukraine, then over these last few days we have seen that more than 20 countries have already agreed to support Ukraine. So really Ukraine gets strong support to defend their country and territorial integrity of their country. So we definitely continue to support these directions and invite also other like-minded countries to do the same. And with regard to NATO, it's of course we must really take into account these current security concerns and developments and continue to strengthen defense and deterrence posture of NATO. Thank you.
Minister Rinkevičius.
Well, thank you very much. I think that, again, my colleagues already outlined basically all those points that I wanted to stress, and I could agree with them. But let me just say one thing. I do believe that such decisions as NATO involvement are the last resort decisions, and they are being taken by all 30 member states. So that's number one. Number two, I do believe, and I think that we should be prepared to work on even harsher sanctions, not excluding the possibility of sanctioning also oil and gas sector that is as you may imagine, very important to Russia. And here I very much agree with Secretary Truss when you, Liz, were alluding that the main target currently is to make sure that Russian economy and financial system is not able to fund Russian war machine. If we get this right, then we can avoid any other scenarios. And I think that we still have avenues to explore and to work together. Thank you.
Žygintas Abromaitis, Lithuanian national broadcaster. A question for Madam Truss. Russia for many years expressed an aggressive point of view of history. They've tried to rewrite it. And we see right now that many Russian people do not believe that the war is happening. Do you believe that the sanctions could spark a resistance inside Russia and lead to changes? Thank you.
Well, your question is absolutely correct about the clearly expressed ambitions of President Putin. But I don't believe he speaks on behalf of Russian people. And what we have seen over the last week is some very brave people in Russia protesting, standing up against the regime. And we need to make sure we get the information to them about what is actually happening. It's much harder to control information in the world of social media. And we need to make sure, as I've said, that the Russian economy is crippled. So it is unable to continue to fund Putin and the war machine. And I suspect that the Russian people will draw their own conclusions from that.
I believe we have a question from Süddeutsche Zeitung.
Thank you very much. Kai Strittmatter from Germany's Süddeutsche Zeitung. I have a question for Mr. Landsbergis, which goes a little bit beyond Europe. Given your problems with China and Taiwan last year, could you first maybe make a short comment on China's role in this crisis now? And secondly, especially in Germany, we've seen a lot of soul-searching and regret about our recent naivete towards Russia and the authoritarian nature of its regime. Would you think that there are lessons from this also towards our relationship with China in the future? Thank you.
I think that all of us are going through a soul search, seeing what's happening in Ukraine and what Russian military machine is able and capable of doing with direct orders coming from Kremlin, from Putin. Probably this is one of the few capitals in the world where a year ago, 10 years ago, you could have asked, how do we see the situation? And many people would have predicted what is happening now. It doesn't give a different moral obligation now, currently, but you would have a lot of people who are very clear-sighted of what could come next. So probably answering also your first question is, it's not that big of a surprise that a stand for Taiwan happened here as well. It was born out of the same roots of defending the principles that bore our independence and that helped defend the freedom that we so much cherish.
Eglė Račkauskaitė, Lanky Television News. A question for both Lithuanian and Latvian ministers, because you mentioned this. As you said that we've been working on deterrence and now we have to go to defense. Can you please explain what that would mean practically? Thank you.
Well, I think that it's, first of all, it's an important political shift in the decision-making process. When we were talking, and we still are talking about deterrence, Russian troops were hundreds of kilometers away from NATO borders. They were securely stationed in their bases, spending their summers, winters in a somewhat controllable environment. Now they are very close to NATO borders, engaged in the military action, unprovoked military action against an independent sovereign country, Ukraine. So it merits an answer from a defensive alliance. That this alliance, it's not only about sending a political message, a deterring message, but it's about a very specific instruments that would be used for defense. And I won't go into specific tactical details. It's best if they are mentioned by people from another ministry, from Ministry of Defense. But I think all areas for defending our region should be looked at. That means air defense, ground defense, maritime defense. They think they all need a very sharp and specific look.
Okay, just very quickly to add to what Gabriela said. I think that so far deterrence really worked well. But now we must revisit based on the experience that we see in Ukraine. And I think that there is plenty of things to learn from Ukrainians and from what is happening to Ukraine and immediately to adapt in the NATO defense doctrine. But air defense capabilities need to be strengthened. Maritime defense capabilities must be strengthened. More boots on the ground must be put in. Command control elements must be strengthened. And one thing that I want to stress, which is equally important, it's not like military defense, but also cyber defense must be revisited, and cyber defense operations must be also put on an equal footing when we speak about defending any of NATO countries or NATO territory in the 21st century. And of course, my most favorite subject is also fighting back disinformation. I think that what we are seeing right now, using information, lying to the people, both in Russia but also to the broader public, trying also to put some kind of uneasiness in NATO countries so that we have many questions. Threatening nuclear weapons, those things also need to be addressed in a collective way by our stratcoms, and we are actually facing unprecedented, let's say, multidisciplinary situation. So from that point of view, that is something that I would describe as also initial thinking on what we should do and what we are going to discuss, not only at NATO foreign ministers level, also at experts level, at defense ministers level, and we will be working.
We have time for two last questions. Colleague from Netherlands, please.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. Mark Duursma from NRC, the Netherlands, for Mr. Landbergis. Also about regional security and also about the shift that's being announced from deterrence to defense. What exactly does it mean in the practical way? But do you have a concrete wish list for NATO for the meeting tomorrow? Things have set in motion already, but what's the primary thing that has to be done next? And my second question is about the specific situation of Lithuania. Belarus is nearby, but also Kaliningrad. Do you have a good view of what the military situation is in Kaliningrad?
I think that we've covered parts of your first question by answering last question. We do have a specific wish list, but it has to come from, first of all, from the political decision. Secondly, from the planning that is done by NATO planning centers, let's call it that, and taking into account a specific situation where Baltic states find themselves in. And there are some differences within the countries, and you mentioned one specific element that is unique for Lithuania, is that we have a border with Russia, but to the west. We also do have a border with Belarus to the east, but it's more common practice. So looking into these elements, we think that a very specific strategy has to be applied to the region, but also to Lithuania, due to uniqueness of geography. If I were to mention specifics, but again, it's just taking one element out of the whole strategic approach, I would say that it's air defense. This is probably a number one from our wish list.
I would like to add that at the moment in NATO we are also preparing a new strategic concept, and from our perspective, of course, all these assessments of the new security situation in Europe must be taken into account for long term, and we must reflect all these security problems that we have at the moment in Europe in strategic concept, and also provide permanent means and solutions from NATO long term.
Paskutinis klausimas.
Milda Šeputytė with Bloomberg. A question to Madam Truss. Thousands of people in Ukraine are fleeing to the border, and they need a safe passage. Also, medical supplies need to reach the most vulnerable. What can be done to achieve a humanitarian corridor, and how could this be achieved? Thank you.
Well, you are absolutely right about the dire situation, and the United Kingdom has sent teams to the border to assist, particularly in Poland, but also in other countries facing those issues. I was in Geneva yesterday, or sorry, the day before yesterday, meeting the UN and others to talk about making sure a humanitarian corridor is established for the safe passage of aid and humanitarian support.
Of course, we must continue to work towards this goal also at the United Nations level, because for the humanitarian corridors we need agreement from also from Russia, from Ukraine, for all the fighting sites, and of course it's extremely difficult as Russia is the member of the United Nations Security Council, but definitely we must continue to have this political pressure at the UN level. And yesterday's decision by United Nations member states to clearly show that Russia is aggressor was a good sign that the international community understands where the problem is. But we need to continue to work at the UN level so that there is another resolution to help to establish this humanitarian corridor in Ukraine for these people there.
Spaudos konferencija. Would you like to add something?
No, thank you.
Spaudos konferenciją baigiame. Ačiū dalyviams.
Good. Thank you very much. That was good.
Killed and buried by Armenian military in mass graves